You wake up in a life that feels almost yours. The bed is familiar. The phone glows with notifications that beg for your attention, and yet something feels off. You sense it beneath the noise, a quiet deceit humming under the surface. You scroll, you consume, you perform. But a small part of you knows none of this was ever your desire. You've been trained to want what drains you, to chase what leaves you emptier, to crave what costs more than you can pay. Not in money, but in sanity, time, and peace. Every human being lives in debt to their own illusions. You owe interest on every false dream you inherited. Every time you chase admiration, validation, or love, you're repaying a debt to someone else's definition of worth. You want control, but you worship the things that enslave you. You want peace, but you lust for chaos. You say you want truth, but you demand comfort. Look closer. The paradox isn't accidental. It's designed. Your desires didn't emerge from your essence. They were engineered into you. Who benefits when you crave what destroys you? Who gains when you can't afford the price of your own wants? Every advertisement, every social ritual, every moral code whispers the same seduction. You're incomplete until you obey your desire. But they never mention the second part of the equation, the emotional cost. The silent toll that turns freedom into fatigue. People think slavery vanished when chains disappeared. It didn't. It evolved. It became psychological. Now you don't need to be forced to obey, you volunteer. You click, you buy. You beg for validation. You crave belonging so much that you hand over your mind in exchange for a few seconds of simulated significance. They've discovered something the ancients could only dream of, the art of making you desire your own servitude. You're told to dream big, but never to ask whose dream you're pursuing. You're told to follow your passion, but never to notice that your passions were pre-packaged and sold to you. You're told to be yourself, but yourself has been sculpted by algorithms, expectation, and fear. Tell me, how can you afford to keep desiring when every desire depletes you? When every emotional investment leaves you poorer, weaker, more dependent? The truth is simple and cruel. People desire what they can't afford emotionally because that's how the system maintains control. It keeps you reaching upward, never fulfilled, always hungry. A well-fed slave might rebel. A starving one only prays harder. Desire isn't freedom. It's the leash. And you wear it proudly, mistaking it for ambition. Think of the faces around you, tired eyes scrolling through endless screens, searching for something undefined. They don't even know what they want anymore. They only know they should want. The machinery of society doesn't run on truth. It runs on dissatisfaction. A restless population is the most obedient kind. You were never meant to be calm. You were meant to be stimulated. Because calm people think. Stimulated people obey. This is the first truth Machiavelli understood centuries ago. If you can't control a man's body, control his desires. Make him believe he's free while chaining his will to invisible appetites. You desire status because someone told you status equals safety. You desire love because you were taught that being alone is failure. You desire recognition because the system convinced you that without it you don't exist. You're not living a life, you're performing one, and performance costs energy. Energy that could have been spent on clarity, creation, or solitude is instead burned on keeping up appearances in a world built to exhaust you. Ask yourself, what if your suffering isn't accidental? What if the emptiness you feel after every achievement isn't a flaw in you, but proof that the entire structure is a lie? You desire what you can't afford because that's the point. Because as long as you keep reaching for what drains you, you'll never have the strength to question who profits from your exhaustion. This is the silent war of the modern age, not between nations or ideologies, but between attention and awareness, between who you are and what the world needs you to be to keep functioning. Every time you choose distraction over thought, validation over solitude, or comfort over truth, you lose a small war inside your own mind. And every time you lose, the system wins. The question isn't why do you suffer? The question is, who taught you to crave the things that make you suffer? You stand at the edge of a quiet realization. Your desires aren't yours. Your dreams aren't yours. And the life you think you want might be the very thing built to keep you powerless. Now the question sharpens, can you afford what you desire, or are your desires designed to keep you in debt forever? Because only when you see the cost will you begin to understand the architecture of your own enslavement. And that is where the true revelation begins. The moment you realize your desires are not your own, something inside you fractures. It's not a clean break, it's a quiet implosion. You begin to see the patterns, how every decision, every craving, every emotional investment was quietly sculpted by hands you never saw. You were trained to believe in the illusion of autonomy. But real autonomy, it's unbearable for most. It means standing outside the herd, stripped of comfort, stripped of the narcotic of belonging. Most people would rather be enslaved with company than free in solitude. That's the psychological root of the problem. Freedom costs peace. Enslavement offers sedation. Machiavelli knew that human beings are rarely ruled by logic. They are ruled by fear and longing. He wrote that it is safer for a ruler to be feared than loved, because fear is predictable. Love is chaos. Desire too is chaos, but controllable chaos. You don't need chains when people are bound by their own hunger. And this hunger isn't accidental. It's engineered. From birth, you are conditioned to crave approval, the soft drug that rewires the mind. Parents teach it first, not from malice, but from insecurity. Be good, they say. Make us proud. You learn that love is conditional, tied to performance. That's where the seed of emotional debt is planted. The family becomes the prototype of society's manipulation, reward compliance, punish authenticity. You grow up mistaking obedience for goodness. You suppress your instincts because instinct threatens harmony. You build a mask and then forget you're wearing one. By the time you enter the world, you no longer ask, who am I? You ask, who do they need me to be? This is the first layer of psychological control. Identity as performance. Nietzsche saw it as the death of the authentic self. He warned that man would rather will nothingness than face the terror of having no purpose dictated to him. A life without a master feels intolerable, so people invent invisible ones, ideals, causes, gods, systems to submit to. Anything to avoid the agony of raw freedom, and so the manipulation continues, subtle and omnipresent. The state feeds you ideology. Corporations feed you lifestyle. Society feeds you morality. Each one whispers, this is who you are. This is what you should want. But the truth hides beneath. They don't care who you are, only that your desires align with their interests. You think you buy products. You're mistaken. You become the product. You think you express individuality. You're following a pre-written script. You think you make choices, but most of your choices were decided by psychological architecture, designed to predict and guide your behavior decades before you knew what choice was. Huxley understood it well. The most effective dictatorship is one that makes people love their servitude. You don't rebel against pleasure. You consume yourself into compliance. You surrender willingly, convinced that consumption equals freedom. Jung would have called it the tyranny of the collective shadow, the unconscious pull of conformity. Every time you silence your inner dissent to avoid rejection, you feed that shadow. Every time you conform for safety, you sacrifice a piece of your soul. You begin to notice the consequences. People chase wealth, but fear losing it. Chase love, but fear intimacy. Chase success, but fear exposure. The modern mind oscillates between craving and anxiety, an endless pendulum designed to keep it from ever finding equilibrium. Schopenhauer called it the will to life, a blind, restless striving that never ends, because the moment desire is fulfilled, boredom arrives to replace it. The system capitalizes on this biological trap. It manufactures novelty, distraction, artificial significance. You are kept chasing the next stimulation, so you never stop long enough to see the cage. But there's a deeper cruelty beneath this machinery. It isn't just manipulation, it's dependency. Emotional, social, existential dependency. Sartre said that hell is other people. He wasn't talking about hatred, he was talking about dependence. The gaze of others becomes the mirror through which you define yourself. Without their approval, you feel invisible. Without their attention, you feel erased. And that is the core of the invisible prison. You can't stop performing because the audience owns your sense of reality. So you live divided. A self that acts, and a self that watches itself act. The internal observer becomes your silent warden. Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the camps, said that when meaning is lost, man turns to pleasure or power to numb the void. But both are illusions of control. Pleasure fades. Power demands constant renewal. Meaning cannot be outsourced. It must be forged through suffering, not avoided by desire. Yet the modern individual is allergic to suffering. We medicate it, distract from it, label it negativity. But suffering was never the enemy. It was the signal, the pressure of reality against illusion. You were taught to silence that signal, and in doing so you silenced the last voice that could have led you back to yourself. So now you understand the architecture: desire as leash, approval as currency, identity as performance, freedom as myth. You live in a world that rewards the obedient dreamer and punishes the awake realist. And the few who wake up, those who see the pattern, are treated as heretics, because once you see the strings, you can no longer dance the same way. You can't go back to sleep, and that's the first step toward liberation, the unbearable realization that the cage was never around you. It was built within you. Now that you see the machinery, the quiet puppeteers pulling the strings of desire, you begin to feel the weight of it. Not as an idea, but as a presence. It's in the air you breathe, the choices you make, the words you use to describe yourself. It doesn't need to shout. It whispers, and those whispers shape your entire existence. You think you live freely, but your thoughts, your emotions, even your sense of morality are pre-scripted reactions. Like a song you hum without knowing who wrote it. Every day you reenact the same ritual. You wake, you obey, you strive, you compare, you collapse, you repeat. You think you are choosing, yet the menu of choices was written long before you arrived. You're trapped not in a prison of walls, but in a prison of meanings. This is the unseen consequence of psychological manipulation. You lose the ability to distinguish between what you want and what you were taught to want. Every ambition, every goal, every dream, each carries invisible fingerprints. The degree you pursued, the partner you chose, the city you live in, the job you tolerate, all were influenced by a subtle architecture of expectation. You call it life, but it's performance art directed by forces that profit from your confusion. And the most dangerous part? You believe it's you. You defend it. You die for it. Because no prison is stronger than the one you mistake for your identity. Look closely at how this infection spreads. You see it in relationships, the endless negotiation of masks. People don't fall in love. They fall in love with illusions that flatter their insecurities. They crave connection, yet fear authenticity. The moment truth appears, they recoil, because truth threatens the fantasy that sustains them. You see it in ambition, the desperate race to stay relevant. People work themselves into decay for recognition from those they secretly despise. They call it grind, hustle, motivation, but what it really is, emotional debt paid to invisible creditors. Every success becomes another form of servitude. Every achievement another cage, gilded this time, but still a cage. Even morality, the supposed compass of civilization, is just another leash. Societies redefine good and evil not by truth, but by utility. What keeps the herd manageable becomes virtue. What threatens stability becomes sin. The masses obey not because they're righteous, but because they're terrified of being ostracized. Morality is the velvet glove over the iron hand of conformity. You want to believe you're different. You tell yourself you're self-aware, independent, not like the rest. But that's the cleverest illusion of all, the ego's defense mechanism against reality. Everyone thinks they've escaped manipulation, and that belief is the final layer of control. The cage becomes invisible because you've mistaken its bars for boundaries of choice. Modern technology perfected this. It doesn't just sell you products, it sells you identities. Every scroll through a feed is an exercise in comparison, every like a microdose of validation. You think you're connecting, but really you're participating in mass hypnosis. The screen becomes a mirror reflecting your own emptiness. This is the new cathedral, the digital altar where attention is the new god, and you are both priest and sacrifice. Psychologically, you become what the system needs: predictable, anxious, endlessly stimulated but never satisfied. Dopamine spikes replace meaning. Reaction replaces reflection. Noise replaces thought. You are kept oscillating between guilt and gratification, so you never reach equilibrium. You chase freedom through consumption, through romance, through rebellion, but none of it leads you out. Because the enemy isn't external, it's internalized. The cage moves with you, and that is the most horrifying realization. Escape does not come from running. It comes from dismantling what runs you. This is why most never change. They'd rather stay distracted than dissect themselves. Self-awareness is dangerous. It kills the comfortable illusion of innocence. Once you see your own complicity, you can never return to ignorance. And ignorance is the sweetest drug of all. Consider the structure of your emotions. Even pain is commercialized. Grief becomes content. Anger becomes engagement. Desire becomes data. Every human feeling is harvested, converted, and sold back to you as identity. You are not a person. You are a market segment, and yet you still call it freedom. Here lies the paradox. The more you chase control, the less you have it. The moment you try to master desire, you strengthen it, because attention feeds what it fears. You try to manifest, self-improve, become better. All noble lies that keep you orbiting the same axis of need. The unseen consequence of this cycle is spiritual exhaustion, a fatigue that seeps deeper than sleep can heal. You feel it in the silence between tasks, in the dull ache that follows every pleasure. You're tired not because you've done too much, but because you've lived too long in false directions. And here's the cruelest truth. You were never meant to win this game. The system needs your hunger more than your happiness. It thrives on your reaching, not your arrival. When you finally glimpse the pattern, despair sets in. The mind recoils. You want to deny it, to go back, to believe again, but the curtain has been torn. You can't unknow what you've seen. The truth is merciless. You are complicit in your own captivity. You built the cage, decorated it, and called it meaning. You feed it daily with attention, emotion, and belief. But once you see the bars clearly, once you recognize how the machinery feeds on your inner chaos, you also glimpse the possibility of power. Not the power to control others, the power to control yourself. And that realization is the beginning of rebellion. Freedom begins where comfort ends. And rebellion doesn't start with fire or protest. It starts in silence. The moment you stop performing. The moment you stop begging for permission to exist. The first rebellion is internal, the rejection of illusion. Not the loud kind that shouts at the world, but the cold surgical kind that cuts away every comforting lie. You begin to look at your desires as a strategist, not a believer. You interrogate them like suspects. You ask, who sent you? What do you want from me? This is what Machiavelli would have done. He never trusted emotion. He saw it as a tool, useful when wielded, deadly when obeyed. The weak obey their emotions. The strong exploit them. You cannot master your life until you master the tides within your own mind. To break free, you must first learn indifference, the rarest and most misunderstood form of power. Not apathy, not numbness, but a ruthless neutrality toward all that seeks to control you. Praise, blame, fear, love, loss, observe them without surrender. The moment you stop needing outcomes, the world loses its leverage. They control you through your reactions. They provoke, flatter, and threaten, knowing that the emotionally reactive are the easiest to predict. So the rebel's first weapon is restraint. Silence when others demand outrage. Calm when they expect panic. Detachment when they crave your validation. The second rebellion is strategic deceit, a concept the moralist will never understand, but the Machiavellian must master. You do not owe the world your transparency. Honesty is a luxury of those who hold power. Until you do, your truth is a liability. In a society built on manipulation, sincerity is suicide. You must learn to wear masks, not to deceive yourself, but to navigate those who cannot handle truth. The cunning mind doesn't reject the game. It learns to play without losing itself. Machiavelli wrote that men must be either caressed or destroyed. In modern terms, people will either seek to use you or destroy you. The only safe position is to be beyond their reach. That means emotional independence. Your worth cannot depend on approval, and your peace cannot depend on outcomes. Detach from the need to be liked. Detach from the illusion of fairness. Detach from the childish hope that people will treat you as you treat them. The world is not just. It is strategic. And power belongs not to the pure, but to the perceptive. Study the patterns of human weakness, not to exploit others, but to stop them from exploiting you. Understand vanity, insecurity, guilt, and fear. These are the levers by which society moves you. The moment you can see them, they can no longer control you. To be free is to be untouchable, not because you escape the world, but because you've stopped expecting mercy from it. You will lose people. You will be misunderstood, but that is the price of clarity. Those who depend on illusion will always resent those who see too clearly. Let them. Their resentment is proof that you've left their cage. The third rebellion is selective ambition, the art of wanting less but more precisely. Desire in itself isn't evil. Unfocused desire is. The system thrives on your scattered hunger. It needs you chasing 10 things so you never master one. The Machiavellian mind chooses one pursuit and drains all emotion from the rest. Concentration is rebellion. A focused mind is the one thing this world cannot exploit. Nietzsche called this the path of the Übermensch, the one who creates his own values when all others have decayed. He doesn't seek approval. He defines it. He doesn't beg for purpose. He constructs it. Your rebellion begins when you stop asking what life owes you and start asking what you owe your potential. But beware, freedom has no applause. There will be no recognition, no crowd waiting to congratulate you for seeing the truth. Freedom is cold, lonely, and merciless. It offers no comfort, only power. The world will call you arrogant, detached, cynical. Let them. Those words are weapons of the weak, thrown at anyone who refuses to kneel. You will see people clinging to illusions, praying for external saviors. You will want to shake them, but you mustn't. Pity is another form of attachment. Let them sleep. Your task is not to save them, it's to see clearly. You begin to understand what all great strategists understood. Control begins with self-discipline. Influence begins with silence. Power begins with the ability to not react. When you can watch chaos without internal movement, you have won. When you can be insulted without flinching, praised without addiction, loved without dependence, you have become dangerous because then nothing owns you. And that is the essence of rebellion, not the overthrow of systems, but the overthrow of need. You will feel the world grow distant, quieter. The noise will fade and something colder will take its place. Clarity. It will cost you warmth but give you strength. It will isolate you but liberate you. Machiavelli would tell you power doesn't corrupt, it clarifies. It reveals who is capable of bearing truth without breaking. Freedom is not comfort, it's confrontation. You don't find it, you forge it. And the hammer is self-mastery. When you strip everything away, every illusion, every mask, every justification, something terrifying remains. Silence. Not the kind of silence you hear, but the kind that is. The one beneath thought, beneath identity, beneath all the noise you once mistook for life. It feels like standing on the edge of a void. But that void is not death. It's the first taste of real freedom, because this is the truth the world hides from you. Freedom isn't about choice. It's about indifference. To be truly free is to stop needing the world to make sense, to stop expecting justice, recognition, or comfort, to accept that reality is indifferent, and to become indifferent to its indifference. This is the highest form of power, the state of being untouched. You've spent your life chasing meaning, approval, belonging, currencies of the emotional economy that kept you enslaved. But now you see the design. You see how desire was used to herd you, how morality was weaponized to shame you, how hope was dangled like a carrot before the dying. And now you stand where most never arrive, at the end of illusion. What happens next? The weak collapse. They beg to return to the cage, to the comfort of distraction. They run back to noise because silence feels like madness. But you stand still. You let the silence consume you. Because you understand that every illusion destroyed is energy reclaimed. You begin to see how fragile human beings truly are. They mistake survival for purpose, comfort for love, distraction for happiness. They are haunted by meaninglessness, so they construct stories and call them truth. Religion, ideology, romance, all elaborate narcotics to dull the ache of existing. But once you've tasted truth, the narcotics stop working. You can't go back to the dream. You begin to notice something else. Once you no longer need the world, it bends differently around you. People feel your detachment. It unsettles them. They sense that you cannot be manipulated, because you have nothing left to fear losing. You've stepped outside the emotional economy that governs them. This is the paradox of power. The one who seeks control never finds it. The one who abandons need becomes uncontrollable. When you no longer crave approval, you become magnetic. When you no longer chase love, you inspire obsession. When you no longer fear solitude, you become irresistible to those terrified of being alone. This is what the ancients called sovereignty. The internal throne, the state where nothing external defines you. yet everything external is drawn toward you, not through effort, but through presence. Freedom is not about detachment from the world, it's about detachment from illusion. You still move, still act, still influence, but from a place of quiet domination, not desperation. You don't chase, you observe. You don't react, you calculate. You don't seek validation, you radiate certainty. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn how not to be good, meaning he must transcend morality, not descend beneath it. He must operate according to reality, not ideals. That's what you've become, not good, not evil, but clear. And clarity is terrifying to those who live in fog, because once you see through illusion, you see through people. You read the subtext of every interaction, the hunger behind the smile, the insecurity behind the virtue, the manipulation behind the kindness. The world stops being mysterious. It becomes predictable. And when life becomes predictable, control is no longer a struggle. It's a side effect of understanding. That's the final irony. You no longer crave power, yet you hold it. You no longer desire influence, yet it follows you. You no longer seek freedom, yet it exists wherever you stand. This is the brutal, beautiful truth Machiavelli hinted at. Freedom is not won through conquest. It is achieved through indifference. You realize that the most dangerous man is not the one who fights, but the one who doesn't need to. Because he cannot be provoked, persuaded, or possessed. He doesn't demand meaning. He creates it. He doesn't seek truth. He embodies it. He doesn't chase life. He consumes it. When you reach this state, something extraordinary happens. You stop being reactive and start being real. You no longer live in the world. The world begins to live through you. Every move you make ripples outward because it comes from stillness, not fear. This is the point where philosophy ends and power begins. You no longer ask, "What do I want?" You ask, "What is required?" You no longer chase emotion. You wield it. You no longer fear loss. You use it to sharpen yourself. And as you walk through the ruins of illusion, you realize there is nothing to fix, nothing to become, nothing to prove. The cage was never real. The chains were ideas. The prison guard was you. The only true mastery is mastery over self. The only real victory, indifference to defeat. And that is why the few who reach this level of consciousness are not saints or saviors. They are quiet sovereigns. They rule nothing but themselves, and yet the world bends around their silence because they have seen the game and they no longer play. You will walk among the restless, the frantic, the seekers, and they will sense something in you they can't name. A calm that provokes fear, a presence that mirrors their weakness. They will love you, hate you, envy you, but they will never own you. You are no longer part of their economy of desire. You are the debt collector of your own soul. You've paid the price that others refuse to pay, the price of truth. And truth, though cold, is the only real freedom left. So walk quietly. Carry no flag, no ideology, no identity. Move through the noise as through a storm untouched, because you now understand what few ever do. The world's power ends where your indifference begins, and that is the final liberation.